Good morning and welcome to this meeting of the ESPO Finance and Audit Subcommittee. I'll start the meeting by saying that as Lincolnshire is the authority holding the position of Vice Chair for the Management Committee for this current municipal year, they are now due to hold the chairmanship for this committee, the Finance and Audit Subcommittee, until June 2025. Members are recommended to appoint Councillor Sue Rawlings as chairman. Please can somebody nominate and second this position?
I'm happy to propose.
I'm happy to second.
Need somebody in the room. Yeah. I need somebody in the room to second. Thank you, Councillor Butlin. Right. Normally at this stage I would hand over to Councillor Rawlings, but for personal reasons she's not able to join this meeting. So Mrs. Wright, County Councillor at Lincolnshire, has agreed to chair the meeting. So I hand over to you, Mrs. Wright.
Thank you very much, Anna, and good morning, members. It's Councillor Maggie Wright in the chair and from Leicestershire. So welcome to today's meeting of the ESPO Finance and Audit Subcommittee. This meeting is being broadcast live on YouTube and it will also be available for viewing after the meeting. I do have to read some wording regarding us not being quorate. I have been informed that we are not quorate as a meeting within the room today, as we have less than 3 members present. I propose, therefore, that we hold the meeting virtually as we have members signing in. As was agreed by the Management Committee in 2018, in order to overcome the legal issues of needing to meet in person for any issues that require a formal decision. Following this meeting, an email will be sent to all members setting out any decisions taken at the virtual meeting, asking if any member wished to object to the decision taken and to do so within a week. If an objection is received, then a special meeting will be called unless it will be possible to defer consideration to the next formal meeting. If no objection is received within the timescale, the decision would be implemented by the consortium secretary using delegated powers. This protocol was agreed by all constituent bodies and is reflected in the constitution. Okay, can I please ask that all members, I would need a seconder to approve that, I think. Could I have consent? Thank you. Can I please ask that all members and officers have their microphone on mute until they wish or are invited to speak? I need to let you know that we are not expecting a fire alarm today, so if one does sound, please use the stairs to leave the building and convene on the field opposite the visitors' car park. Please follow the Democratic Services officer. We have received apologies from Councillor Shayler at Cambridgeshire, Councillor Jamil from Peterborough and Councillor Jane James from Norfolk are joining us online, so welcome to you and thank you. I need to let you know that due to personal reasons, some of the report being presented today, or the presenters are unable to be with us at the meeting today. As such, the following agenda items will be deferred to a future meeting, which will be scheduled on the 13th of November. These are agenda item 5, 8, 14, 15 and 16. Do I have consent of the committee? Thank you, Councillor Butlin. Minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of February 2024. I propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of February 2024 are taken and read, confirmed and signed. And for that, I also seek a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Butlin. Declarations. Does any member have any interest that they wish to declare? No? Okay, thank you. There are no urgent items. Our first report on the agenda is external audit of the 2023-24 financial statements. This is an item that has been deferred to a future meeting. 5A on the agenda, change of order of business, item 7. I would like to take this first, please. I do need a seconder for that again. Thank you, Councillor Butlin. Item 7. Our next item is Internal Audit Service progress against the 24-25 Internal Audit Plan and Internal Audit Updates. Matt Davies, Audit Manager at Leicestershire County Council, and Neil Jones will present his progress update, which is covered on pages 33 to 66 of the pack. Over to you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, what I would like to do is go through the progress review plan and then just have a quick pause for any questions, then move on to the external quality assessment and have a quick pause as well, and then move on to Neil with the public sector internal audit standards. I think it just lends itself better to 3 distinct areas, if that's okay. Thank you.
That's fine. Just give me the nod.
Thank you. So the progress against plan on page 33 of the pack, moving straight on to paragraph 4. Is progress obviously against the 24-25 plan, but we will incorporate any legacy work that we carried over from 23-24. As a brief reminder, it was the plan that was approved by this committee 14th of February 24. How we formulate our plans, etc., will be part of other papers and have been explained previously, so I didn't intend to dwell on that. Neither did I intend to dwell on, but I'm happy to take questions on our assurance levels of full, partial, substantial and little that are detailed in paragraph 5. But that does bring me nicely onto the high importance recommendations that are detailed in paragraph 9 of the report. It's really pleasing to note that although there was one piece of work in the previous financial year that resulted in high importance recommendations in respect of cyber security, these recommendations were all closed off and addressed. So I'm pleased to report that, subject to approval by this committee, there are no high importance recommendations at the moment. Paragraph 9 also details, in the table on paragraph 10, it details the progress against plan report, and that states that our position with the legacy audits and the 24-25 audits. So to summarise, we completed all 8 pieces of work that were legacy pieces of work that were naturally carried over into 24-25 from 23-24. As you'd expect within this at this stage of the financial year, all that work's closed off. In respect of our 24-25 coverage, as at the date of publication, we completed 3 pieces of work to draft report stage, and we've got 17 at various stages of work in progress. And I really think it's important to talk further about the work in progress, because on face value it could look concerning that with 5 months left of the year we've got a substantial amount to complete. This is fully explained really in paragraph 11 and in the appendices, but just to give a sort of flavour for the reasons for it. Some of them are naturally programmed for the final quarter because they need full sample sizes, or as full as we can get. Some of them just need to be concluded in a timely manner. You know, for example, we've got 3 areas in respect of the warehouse expansion that goes live. We wouldn't give assurance, certainly on 2 of those areas, until we completed that work, one of which is the actual project board itself. And we've got, is it one more meeting, Christian? I think, yeah, one more meeting of that. And then similarly, you'd expect us to be given assurance on the Procurement Act at the same time, there or thereabouts, as it goes live. So that's a little bit of rationale, but just again to give further reassurance, since compiling the document, just an example of how much things have moved forward. 2 of the 3 draft reports that we've got there have converted to final, and 4 of the 17 draft reports, work in progress, are now in draft stage. So that gives an indication of how things are moving forward quite rapidly. Obviously, we won't go into the detail of those because they'd be picked up at a future committee, but I just wanted to give a flavour that actually the work is coming through. I've got another about 2 or 3 on my desk as well to look at as well. So really, in concluding the progress against plan, the highlights as far as I'm concerned, we're on track at the minute for the 24-25 plan, and there are no high importance recommendations to bring to the attention of this committee. I'm more than happy to take any questions. Just briefly pause before moving on to the external quality assessment, if there are any.
Thank you. Are there any questions at this point? No. Just a point from me, just really pleased to note the cyber security issue that was completed in August. So thank you. So if you'd like to carry on, no questions.
Sure, thank you. So moving on to the external quality assessment on page 36 of the pack, as paragraph 14 explains, public sector internal audit standards require us to have a external quality assessment once every 5 years. In effect, I always say this tongue in cheek, but the audit has been audited. It's important to note that this has to be undertaken by a qualified independent assessor. Paragraph 15 explains who we appointed and that this committee was informed of it in February 24. Really, to sum up their work, they check for our professionalism, quality, effectiveness of the function as a whole. So moving on to paragraph 16 of the report, the result is that we generally conform. Now, I know that sounds quite bland, but generally conforms is in fact the highest rating available. So, so just very briefly, again, unpicking the salient bits out of the report that are mentioned in paragraph 17, sorry. I think it's worth noting that in terms of benchmarking contained in the report, the overall assessment we were given was a score of 2.69, and just to get that into actual something meaningful, it ranged the assessors' marks for all the assessments they took out ranged between 2.19 and 2.71. So without going into the detail, it meant we were in the top 96% of the ones that it actually looked at. So really pleased with that. And then again, very briefly, he went on to benchmark us against some sector analysis he did, and it compared our resources, competency and delivery against local government, housing and the private sector. And it concluded that we were well above the established rating and close to excelling rating in all three of the areas, but we were the highest in all the industry standards for both competency and delivery. So hopefully that will give you some assurance in respect of the quality of the service delivered, but also equally as importantly, because officers and selected members were asked to feed back on our service, I think it's really important for us to all celebrate the success, and for me to thank you on behalf of the service for the feedback that was provided to the assessor. Again, I'm more than happy to take any questions or comments before Neil takes you through the public sector internal audit standards, but I don't know if you want to pause first.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? No? No? Yes, oh, sorry, Christian.
It wasn't a question. I wanted to see if members had questions first, but just a comment really to just to give the committee assurance. We were invited as a customer to participate in this, so I was part of the kind of feedback into the assessment and was happy to do so. So, and it kind of chimes with the kind of experience we receive as a customer of this service. So I think that's worth putting on record.
Thank you. No, just a comment from myself when I read it, and I did spend some time yesterday reading it, although I've gone and forgot my notebook today, so it's all on my phone, so excuse me. But I did think that generally conforms, as you say, when you read it, you think, oh, generally conforms, but it is the top possible mark, so congratulations on that. And I was also pleased to read about the benchmarking that came out very positively too. And the link is in the paper, and I would recommend anybody to click on that link and have a look at it. So thank you very much. So
thank you, Chair. Now it's over to, if that's okay, over to Neil.
Over to Neil. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just close off this paper, Chair. So we mentioned the blandness of internal audit quality statements, and this is about internal audit standards, which is about as bland as you can get, really. Just to let you know, really, the report explains there's two consultations currently underway. And the first is about a revision to the global internal audit standards. And this particular consultation, it's unlikely that the subcommittee is going to get involved in too much detail, but I'll just give you a little bit of background. So paragraphs 18 to 22, the global internal audit standards have been revised. In the past, we had a separate set of public sector internal audit standards, which we were assessed against. Now, what they are aiming to do is to just map out the public sector internal audit standards against the global standards to effectively mirror them. But there will be a small number of additional requirements and interpretations which protects our role in the public sector. And there is one specific, which is a second consultation I'll come on to in a minute. And those new standards then will apply to the work we do from the 1st of April 2025. We've got a bit of a lead in time to get our heads around them. So on the first consultation, there's an application note out, and that application note, it explains in there where they're trying to preserve interpretations and additional requirements in the public sector, which are not required in the global sector. And they include things like, I'll come on to it in a minute, annual opinion, governance statements, heads of internal audit are professionally qualified. So you can understand how SIPFA is trying to align things that were in the public sector internal audit and keep and preserve them. There are some concerns from my colleagues and myself. You know, the global standards are quite intricate, and it is going to take some resource impact. I belong to the council's audit network. We're called Council's Audit Network, and I'm pretty sure your heads of internal audit of the partner organisations belong to that as well. So we're looking at just putting together a collective response on that consultation, which has got to go in by tomorrow. So the second consultation, this is in paragraphs 23 to 30. I think this is more relevant to this subcommittee and other committees that I attend, since it does relate to the governance of the internal audit function. And in this sense, these are classed as essential conditions. So it's ensuring effectively that the subcommittee and the senior management has good processes and effective processes in place to make sure its internal audit function is working well. So SIPFA, the accounting body, it represents the interests of local government for in public sector internal audit, and it's consulting until the end of November on this one to introduce what they call a code of practice on the governance of internal audit. So that code will, as I briefly mentioned, ensure that all authorities support the best use of their internal audit resource and provide robust governance. So it's given a framework for more support, more challenge to the internal audit function, trying to make sure that that is always effective. It is aligned to those charged with governance, so members, and also its senior management. So there's responsibilities here that I'm bringing to your attention now today. And what it does is it sets out conditions for internal audit consistent with guidance that we generally apply. So SIPFA overall doesn't think there's going to be too much of an upheaval here, but it is trying to get a standardised framework so that we can all apply it in the same way. One additional thing is that conformance to the code, should it be accepted, and I think it will be reviewed. So conformance will be reviewed, and it's another conformance, and then we'd report that in the governance statement, which comes to this committee here. So that consultation doesn't end until the 30th of November. So I will be briefing the chair of this subcommittee and the principal officers before submitting a response back, and then hopefully both consultations will be concluded and I can report back to the February subcommittee on the outcomes. That's all I've got to say, really, just for information, really.
Thank you very much, Neil. Does anybody have any questions for Neil? No. Just a note from myself. I read about the SIPFA comments and about being time consuming, and I must admit, when I read through, I thought, well, this is going to be time consuming, so it would be good to have feedback on that once the consultations and everything have come in, if there is extra work and and what benefits really come out of that. So thank you very much. So I move that we note the progress against the 2024-25 plan, that there are no high importance recommendations within the committee's domain, the outcome of the independent external quality assessment of Leicestershire County Council's internal audit service was positive, and that an action plan is in place, and consultation on implementing new internal audit standards and proposals for a code of practice for the governance of internal audit in the UK local government are underway. Could I please have a seconder? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Butlin. Ladies and gentlemen, members, we now go back to item 6, and I hand over to Councillor. Oh, sorry, I have a note. Rawlins. I now hand over to Councillor Rawlins, who's joined us. So Councillor Rawlins has now joined the meeting, so I will hand over the chairmanship to her and we will return to a quorum meeting. Thank you. Please bear with us while we change.
Thank you all for your forbearance. Unfortunately, there was quite a severe accident at Newark and I was sat for 40 minutes in a tailback, so I do apologise for that. And thank you to everyone for filling in for me. Very much appreciated. Yeah, okay. So if we can then move, as my colleague said, to item 6, which is the Internal Audit Service Annual Report. And we'll pass over to Neil Jones, as Head of Internal Audit, to take us through that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back a little now, we've just mentioned that they're changing the audit standards, but under the current standards, up until the end of this financial year, I'm required to present an annual report to the board of this organisation. And the board for ESPO is classed as the Finance and Audit Subcommittee. And that subcommittee, the terms of reference allow for the subcommittee to formally approve the annual report. So there are specific requirements for incorporating the report, and the most important being my opinion on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of ESPO's control environment. Just to spell that out, that's its frameworks of systems of governance, risk management and internal control. So much as in previous years, the way I do this is to explain how I reached that opinion, and that's in an annex found from page 21. And the audits that Matt and his team concluded throughout the year form a good part of that opinion, but I'm also allowed to take into account other elements of work that I think is useful to form that opinion. So I can evaluate the control environment through, for instance, observations of the associated governance through committees, policies and procedure changes. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice a little. So Matt and his team, when they're doing their audit engagements, they provide what we call micro assurance. So on each individual piece of work, it's classed as micro assurance. When we bring it all together, it's classed as macro insurance over the year. So I bring all together all the threads using themes and trends and evidence and professional judgment to try and provide a holistic insight into. Oh, thanks to them for croak. So that provides some sort of strategic insight over the organisation. And a couple of years back, we discussed this, and I managed to find some good guidance from the Institute of Internal Auditors about their definition of substantial assurance, and that's how I fitted it to ESPO. So it's substantial assurance from the IIA. If you hear this, it's a sound framework of control, effectively mitigating key risks, contributing to the achievement of business objective, and that's backed up by the fact there were no audits classed last year as partial assurance, and there were no new high importance recommendations. There are occasionally medium risk rated weaknesses in or improvements identified in individual engagements, and we do retain confidence in management's attitude to resolving any identified issues. So that opinion in terms of substantial assurance is listed bottom of page 23, and it's carried over into the report itself. In the appendix, which is effectively the annual report, after some background, I repeat the opinion. I then, starting in paragraph 8, go through just a summary context really. We had 9 assurance audits returning substantial assurance ratings, so the micro audits. We did 7 pieces of consulting and advisory type audits, where nothing came out of those of any prominence. We didn't defer any audits last year, but we did have that where 3 audits spanned over into the current year. I think Matt touched on those earlier on. There's a table showing how we performed in terms of the audits we were producing. And then just briefly touch again, paragraph 17 and 18 again, about the 5-yearly independent external quality assessment, saying we continue to conform. We have got an action plan that's underway. There are some suggested improvements. And then finally, I know that the annual governance statement has been held back now, but obviously my work and the work of building up the annual governance statement so operate in tandem. So I reached an opinion on that there was no significant governance issues that have been brought to my attention. That again, that helps me form in my opinion. So in the cover report, just to the headlines from that really. So overall, there were positive opinions again given in all the 3 components of the control environment. There was an overall substantial assurance rating that the environment remains adequate and effective. Majority of the planned work was achieved, continued to conform to standards, and again, I wasn't aware of any significant governance issues. What I intend to do is I'll share this report once it's approved with my colleagues, heads of audit for your partner organisations. They can then use that in forming their own opinions on their assurance requirements. So that's all I have to say, really. If you've got any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Neil. I'll pass over to my colleagues for any comments or questions.
Just a comment, Madam Chair, just to say another positive and very pleasing to read the report, and thank you very much to the officers.
Yes, no, very positive. Obviously, the cybersecurity issues are always ongoing, so I think that's something generally that local authorities and institutions have to see as a regular review point. But yeah, in terms of everything else, I think that's highly satisfactory. And thank you to the officers of the organisation and for all your hard work in monitoring the internal audit situation. Obviously, you know, we look forward to the coming months, and hopefully everything will be fine. So, yeah, any further questions from anyone? No? So I'd like to move that we approve the Internal Audit Service annual report, which Neil has just presented for 23-24. So could I seek a second? Is in favour?
Yeah, I hope you don't mind it. You weren't here earlier when I asked the previous chair if I could possibly leave the meeting now.
No, absolutely fine, Neil. Thank you. Thank you once again for all your input. Thank you. So if we can move on to item 8, which is the Treasurer's report on the financial statements and the annual governance statement. Also, which we have, of course, we have deferred to the next meeting. I think is as we agreed before, so that's fine. And then item 9, which is contract procedure rules, and I'll turn over to Christian, the Director of ESPO, to take us through this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So members be pleased, I'm moving you on from audit onto corporate procurement rules. So hopefully this will be as interesting as the audit stuff. So just a short cover report. The purpose of it is to seek approval to submit revised contract procedure rules for management committee to make final approval. I think the report is kind of self-explanatory, so I won't read it out, but I will cover a few key points. I think the premise of this is just simply that we haven't reviewed our CPR since 2021, and with the delayed Procurement Act, it's meant that there needs to be a review now. We also work in tandem with Leicestershire County Council, and therefore they have recently reviewed these rules to apply to the county, and therefore ESPO needs to do the same. The amendments are shown in Appendix A and B and have been worked up by the legal and procurement teams across ESPO. And in Appendix C, you've got a copy of a clean set of the proposed rules. I think what's probably relevant for me to cover is paragraph 13. And this is trying to explain this kind of complicating system we're going to have for a while. So we've got new procurement rules coming in as a result of the Procurement Act 2023 that come in February 2024. So the people who have read this thoroughly will notice a slight typo when it talks about Management Committee in 2025. That should be 2024. So we have new procurement rules due in February 2024, which will require Management Committee to reapprove separate CPRs. So what we're asking is that Management Committee give the powers to approve those new ones to Finance and Audit Committee, because in effect we're going to have two sets of rules going. We're having the ones that we're seeking approval to change today, and they'll be for procurements that start before the new legislation, and then we'll have CPRs that will apply to procurements that are after that legislation point. And as I say, today this is about seeking to pass this through to Management Committee for approval, and then when we go to Management Committee we'll ask them to give Finance Audit Committee approval for the new rules, which I know is all very complicated, but fits with the governance. So that's all I think I really need to cover. Hopefully that makes sense, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions? Kristen?
This is pure, really, curiosity, I think. And I think when it mentions, and I think it's modification rule 30, and it's on pages, it's referred to in several pages, 98, 144, but it's the figure 179,087. So specific when it's either 25,000 under over. Why is that so oh, you know what I mean. Specific.
I do know what you mean, because these rules are dealing with two things. They're dealing with legislation about the law for UK public procurement, and they're dealing with local decisions about thresholds. So at lower amounts, you can choose where your thresholds are and what procurement process you should follow. So naturally, you'd imagine a council would say 25,000 because that's a round number. The reason the other one isn't a round number is because it's set in legislation. It's actually euros converted to pounds, and it's part of the legal framework. So that's why you get a peculiar number.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just didn't get that. Thank you.
Just in general, we've been talking about the new procurement laws for quite a while, back and forth on this committee. To the business as a whole, would you say the changes have been a negative in terms of extra administration costs, or has it been a positive for you as an organisation? Now you're coming out through actually implementing it.
I would say undoubtedly there's more burden in terms of administration, which people could perceive as a negative, quite understandably, because that costs money. I think as someone who was invited in the early stages to kind of input into what the law should look like, I kind of have that insight of why it is that way, which is broadly to try and prevent, getting into litigious environments. So the idea is the more transparent you are and open you are at the start, the less likely you're going to end up into situations which require sort of heavy legal input. And that's the kind of policies they use in other countries. So somewhere like Norway, they have very few legal challenges, but they have all this kind of onerous stuff up front to create transparency. So it will cost us money. We're having to make slight changes to make sure we can keep up with the transparency requirements, but hopefully that added transparency might pay off in terms of that sort of litigious environment that sometimes follows when you're not transparent.
Thank you, Kristen. Just one for me, if I may. I think we just had a brief discussion about this when we discussed it at the last management committee. Do you anticipate any further contract procedure rules changes coming from directives from central government in the next financial year, shall we say, or do you think this will be a sort of the position that will hold for some time?
It's a really good question. I don't know. I think it's really hard to predict, isn't it? Any government, what they're going to do. They have a mechanism called procurement policy notes, PPNs, that come out and give kind of little updates. So I would imagine that this has been such a substantial piece of work that when it does go in, it will hold as a piece of legislation, but there will be undoubtedly tweaks. Yeah,
I would think so, yeah.
And you asked because obviously there was some conversations in the media a little while ago about the procurement limits and everything for the Ministry of Defence and how they were going to review those. So that was just a general query. So any further questions, please? No? So thank you, Christian, for that. And so if I could move that we approve the proposed amendments to the contract procedure rules, detailed at appendices A, B and C of the report, the submission to ESPO's Management Committee for their approval at the meeting on the 13th of November 2024. Seconder, thank you, Liz. So if we can then move to item 10, which is the review and revision of the Constitution. So pass over to Lauren. That thing.
Thank you very much, Chair. This report presents a small number of minor amendments to the Constitution. They're summarised at paragraph 4 and appendix 1. As members will see, the first amendment relates to the arrangements for the appointment of the Treasurer and Secretary to the Consortium, with the intention of streamlining these so that the Management Committee is charged with confirming removal, replacement or amendment to the role, rather than having to consider reports in relation to the appointment of individual personnel. As you'll appreciate, appointments such as these rarely coincide with the timing of the Management Committee, and the appointments are in effect ex officio rather than personal incapacity, so it seems appropriate therefore to streamline these. The second two amendments are linked, and they are to address how amendments to the Constitution are progressed and to formally provide for amendments to be considered by this subcommittee and for this subcommittee to make recommendations to the Management Committee for approval. That's not covered in the Constitution at present, so that would be two new additions to the Constitution. The changes of the Constitution, if approved by the subcommittee today, will be referred to the Management Committee for approval at its meeting on the 13th of November. Thank you, Chair.
I move that we approve the changes to the Constitution summarised in Appendix 1 to the report for submission to ESPO's Management Committee, their approval at the meeting on the 13th of November 2024. Could I have a second, please? Those in favour? Thank you. So at item 11, we'll just have to note that the next meeting of the subcommittee is scheduled to take place on Wednesday, the 12th of February 2025 at 10:30. We can move on to item 12. And are there any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent? And I can inform you that there are no such items. If we can then move to item 13, which is exclusion of the press and public, and I move that in accordance with the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the remaining items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information. Have a second, please. Thank you. Wait, I'm just waiting.